Hello guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're exploring a kind of serious topic, which is going to be an unusual way for me to start this channel off with, but we're going to be talking about how female monstrosity was developed from female attributes being used against women. I'm going to be referencing my paper of a causal argument that I wrote on this exact topic. Let's see what we can talk about with this. I would like to start off with a quote from Women and Other Monsters Building a New Mythology by Jess Zimmerman. So for context, Jess Zimmerman is a freelance editor and writer of essays. She writes some fiction, some prose poetry. She lives right here, like an hour away in Philly. She writes a lot of feminist works. She's written Women and Other Monsters, but she's also written Basic Witches. To go ahead with the quote, "For women, the boundaries of acceptability are strict, and there are many. We must be seductive but pure, quiet but not aloof, fragile but industrious, and always, always small. We must not be too successful, too ambitious, too independent, too self-centered, and when we can't manage all the contradictory restrictions, we are turned into grotesques. Women have been monsters, and monsters have been women. In centuries worth of stories, because stories are a way to encode these expectations and pass them on." I want us to focus at the end of that quote specifically, because stories are a way to encode these expectations and pass them on is a very true statement, because we see this used to be these stories told by the fireplace and myths repeated by word or scribes or books, and now we have stories passed on, gossip spread around, and these ideations created and passed through social media. As humans, when we develop new ways of passing stories on, just because now we don't have those myths and we don't create many new monsters. We can make people monsters without altering them physically to pass that level of monstrosity. We can simply just use their actions and their personality to demonize them within society's standards and what society wants you to do versus what it doesn't. I've honestly always been fascinated by how women are portrayed. Well, because I am a woman, and growing up, it was very interesting to observe, whether as a little girl or a teenager, it was interesting to observe the consequences my actions had versus the consequences my brother's actions had, or the boys in my classes. And I've grown up in a lot of different environments, different countries, and one thing that I noticed was the expectations, no matter where you go, the standards for women and the expectations of how their behavior is going to bounce off of others stay very similar. One of those things was how I was expected to be a good influence on like class clown or bad boy, that teachers would want to sit next to me because I was a good student and a woman. So even as a kid, you're seen as a motherly figure or caretaker that's supposed to be a good influence on others. And no matter how good of a student or a role model another boy student could have been, the other boy wouldn't be sat with him. So I think that's very interesting. But also then, any violent action, any grotesque moves made by women are gonna be so much more judged upon than men's. They're not going to be skimmed past. Women's actions definitely seem to me as though they carry heavier consequences than men's. Our mere existence is a provocation. We can't just exist. We can't be here because we have to be defined by others in a way, and we have to be contained, because when we're not contained, we start controlling ourselves and, God forbid, gaining power, and nobody wants that. In the patriarchal system, nobody wants that. A woman's actions are something ultimately to investigate and to undermine, criticize. So a woman's behavior is a mystery to dissect. It's not just by men, it's also by other women or children or just everyone who's raised in this system of believing that women have to act a certain way, which is where this monstrosity comes from. I think that the retelling of stories to demonize women all serves the same purpose, and that is to have women act within a certain boundary, within a certain cage of comfort, so that we never truly reach our highest potential. We don't ever ascend to our fullest potential because we are expected to be a certain way, and if we step out of the line, we get criticized and judged upon. Nobody wants that. Like, we don't want that. That doesn't feel good. So it's very scary to jump out of that line. Be like, hey, I can do this. I can do more than this. You gotta stay right where you are in that safe bubble. I do think it is all ingrained in sexism. The idea of a female monster comes from straight up sexism. There is no sugarcoating around it. It's just an ingrained fear of female autonomy over our ideas and just everything that makes us us, and it's all very human. It's everything that doesn't just make us a woman, it makes us a human being. Somehow men have more access to their brain than we do, because we are made to believe that in order to focus on our brain, we have to get through all these steps first. No one's going to take anyone really ugly seriously, but also if you're vain, no one's going to take your ideas that come from your brain seriously either. This fear of controlling ourselves and of our own decision making and independence has led to the creation of many female monsters and of the female monster in general. If you are a woman who acted freely and had her own desires and needs and went out to get them, or God forbid wanted to be independent and didn't want to be reliant on anyone, you most likely were demonized at one point or another. And it's not a punishment for actual evil doings like being a serial killer or causing harm to anyone else. It's just for being outside of the bounds inflicted upon you. Ancient Greece, that's always been my stuff, so I guess we're gonna start off with that. Because the ancient Greeks had a lot of very interesting portrayals of women, whether it was Hera, who is rooted in jealousy, or Aphrodite, who's vain, and just all of these Greek goddesses, but not only goddesses, because they've had quite a good number of female monsters, such as sirens, who originated in Greek mythology. Actually, I know that they're significant, and they looked, Google sirens in Greek mythology, they're not going to look like what you've seen. When you picture a siren, you picture a mermaid. It's quite different. Basically, we've had sirens, we've had Scylla, I think that's how you say it, the three-headed monster, and then I think Charybdis, I don't remember how to say it, is also female, I believe. There's plenty of female monsters, and yes, there were also male monsters, such as the Cyclops, plenty, but it's a little different. There were also witches. There's a lot of femininity in Greek mythology. Now, the question is that femininity rooted in an accurate portrayal of it, or is it just imposed upon by men? The monster that I do want to specifically focus on is Medusa. Medusa's always been also fascinating to me, just because she's a symbol of perseverance and reinventing yourself after a tragedy has happened to you, and I think that is very important. Like the Medusa tattoos people get if they've been sexually assaulted. I think Medusa's a really interesting figure in Greek mythology. The way the ancient Greeks wanted to see it, I mean, I guess it's different based off of who you are and who you were at that point, but they wanted to see her as a merciless killer, just a monster that emerged from the darkness and decided to turn people into stone. All of a sudden, kill people, turn them into stone, with just this monstrous look as well. Head full of snakes, his hair just not very appealing, terrifying looking. She was supposed to have emerged from Hades as this figure of destruction, but that's not quite what her story is and what it represents to survivors in general. Her monstrosity was inflicted on her by Athena, who turned her into a monster coming from an act that she didn't commit. She didn't support, she had nothing to do with it, it was committed upon her without her will. Basically, Zeus raped Medusa. She was a priestess of Athena, just a simple human, and she was violated by Poseidon, not Zeus. She got violated by him in the goddess's temple, in Athena's temple, leading her to be punished by Athena for, I guess, disrespecting her grounds, her temple, which is ridiculous because Poseidon obviously is a very powerful god. He's one of the main three, therefore he was never punished. It's interesting that people who commit a crime aren't always punished because sometimes they're just too powerful, and then the weaker ones get the punishment. Therefore, Medusa was made by Athena into a monstrous gorgon with snakes instead of hair, which stripped her of her humanity, her femininity, her beauty. Charlotte Curry argues that the mythic figure of Medusa is inherently linked to the idea of transformation. Both her transformation from beautiful woman to monster and her ability to transform all who meet her gaze into statues. Those are very fundamental elements of her story because that's what she is. She's a figure of transformation. She has been transformed, causing her to transform others. Medusa represents a transformation, not just from a woman to a monster, from a woman to a victim of another person's wrongdoing and crimes. Her ability to transform people into stone is a way to symbolize how she was transformed into stone because she was immobilized, incapable of defending herself, and she was rewarded a defense and protection in her monstrosity by Athena afterwards. It is a way that some people look at that. Medusa's story echoes in a pattern of victim blaming. In the modern world, people often do get punished for speaking out about the tragedies that have happened to them, and therefore people do not want to speak out. The story, it makes no sense. She did nothing. She should have gotten support and justice, but instead she got punished. And I think that is so messed up. Makes no sense. In that transformation, we truly see the origin of patriarchal fear. It is a fear that comes from women's transformation and ascension into bigger, higher things. Women's trauma and their pain gets reimagined as danger. Now, from Greek mythology, we take a look at the Bible, the biblical story of Eve. She ate from the tree of knowledge after being tempted by the snake, aka Satan. She was forever to be punished. It wasn't for evil, but for her curiosity. And yes, she was told not to do it, but it was her curiosity as a woman that was ultimately punished. And it was not just her, it was generations forever to come of women. The Bible itself states, "Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." We demonize Eve when we look at her according to the Bible and the story that was told. We don't really look at the extent of the punishment compared to the crime. Was the crime severe enough to cause the punishment onto all women forever, for all eternity, pain during childbirth, and being susceptible to domination of men forever? Are the consequences really proportional to the crime? Eve became a symbol of danger and kind of like a hazard that, like this woman, you don't know what she's going to do. She's a stupid woman who makes emotional, irrational decisions, as we've often seen women to be demonized as. We are irrational and we work based off of emotions as opposed to a logical sense. I think that's downright dumb. She had enough audacity to assert autonomy in a world that was already determined to have control over her. She was already part of Adam. She was only a part of a human. She came from a part of another human, aka a man. So she was never going to be a whole human. So now, instead of feeling for her and analyzing the situation from a clear point of view, all we can do is be mad at her. We take that with a grain of salt. Both of these figures ultimately are a demonstration that the structure we live in and we have lived in for centuries, the patriarchal structure, transformed female agency into monstrosity. Trauma or simple human curiosity, which we are born with, inclined to have even, are a justification for punishment. The cultural evolution of the term female monster and what we picture when such a term is being discussed finds one of its clearest forms in when we picture A female monster. What comes to mind? Witches. Even the Minecraft witch. Just a lonely woman, the muddy, isolated part of the map in a little hut on the little... I can't find the term for anything these days. Even the Minecraft witch is secluded from the rest of society. She doesn't live in the village with the villagers. She lives in her own little hut, separated. And she's evil, and she makes potions, and who knows what she does in her loneliness. It's the mystery of the woman living independently, God forbid, being in a different area than the rest of society is dangerous, because who knows what women could be plotting when they are alone. There's no husband to look over them. They're not a nun. There's no system to look over them and to make sure that they are behaving exactly like they're supposed to. That is what makes a witch so dangerous and so monstrous. Witches, I mean... how demonized are we, you guys? Like, a monster that eats kids, makes potions, poisons especially men, and lives off doing her evil wrongdoings, and eating children is what really gets me, because that can be the biggest danger of a woman, because yes, women are here to produce children, so eating them is a weird contrast. If a woman goes against her children, she is a monster. How can one exterminate something that they brought into the world? It's an almost godly like power, but it's not godly, because you eliminate the innocent life that you brought into this world. Other pigs do that. They eat their kids. Got a little sidetracked there. So a witch is a woman whose knowledge and self-sufficiency make her dangerous. She's self-sufficient. She doesn't need the village. She doesn't need a husband. She likely doesn't have kids. That itself is dangerous. It's too independent for the structure that we live in, that we've been put into. A witch represents the site where women's autonomy and intelligence are both visible and threatening to patriarchal structures. Yes, witches did hide, supposedly. Let's say they existed throughout women, but let's say they didn't exist. There were no witches. They didn't burn witches. They burnt women. They hung women. When you guys were reading The Crucible in high school, did you ever stop to think how excruciating it would be being burnt at the stake? I think it's horrific. It's torturous. That's real monstrous. That's human monstrosity right there. The witch is not an embodiment of evil. It's an anxiety ingrained in sexism and a fear of female autonomy. It's an anxiety that women could be independent and not rely on a man or on having a family. It's a reflection of how society reacts when women don't submit to society's standards. This is even shown in language. In Polish, we have a word wiedźma, which comes from the word wiedzieć, which means to know. But the word wiedźma, it means witch, outwardly way to tie female intellect to know with monstrosity and moral corruption. One cannot escape the other. There is technically from wiedźma, there is wiedźmin, which is the Witcher, a very popular show and video game. It doesn't really have that negative connotation. In the video game at least, it seems like it's a guy that kills monsters, right? We see wiedźma, when we think of it, we don't imagine a cool girl who goes off to kill monsters. It's an old hag that eats kids. It's like Baba Yaga, the tale of Hans and Gretel. It's that type of gal. Wiedźma. That's her. This issue is not just in wisdom, but it's also just in nature itself. Old hag, it's just an insult for women, because the process of aging is so demonized, it's turned into something monstrous. So older women are dismissed as hags. Everyone's scared to age, but women especially. Female celebrities are punished for aging gracefully, embracing their age. Hey, I got to this point. Celebrated only by women, but men do nothing but criticize, because they cannot handle seeing a woman age and being okay with it, because we're supposed to feel ashamed, which is crazy. That's the only thing humans have always done. We've aged, and sometimes it was our maximum age was like 20 years. We couldn't survive longer than that. Now it's more like 90 or 100, and we are ashamed of aging because we look different, and I think it's a beautiful thing. One is lucky to reach that age, but that's not how society sees it when you are a woman. I think the word hag, for something that's inevitable, that word sure drips with absolute contempt. This makes me mad. Having to record this video, honestly, makes me mad. Writing this paper made me mad. I would say I'm at a loss for words, but we are not at a loss. We are all familiar with the crucible, right? Women in Salem are punished for existing outside social norms. As the witches, they're turned into scapegoats for male fear and hypocrisy. Reiterating what I just said all the time. If y'all ain't gonna say it, I'm gonna say it. The real reason for women being witches isn't witchcraft. Personally, I like to believe there's definitely a bit of magic here and there in the world. But let's say it doesn't exist, it's just a disobedience of a narrative. On The Scarlet Letter, on the other hand, another high school classic, Hester Prynne's punishment it was less about her act that she committed and more about the threat that her independence posed to a patriarchal society. It threatened that society. And it would. I think still in today's world, women that don't follow the narratives, the beauty standards, what's holding back ourselves from our pathways to success, I still do think that our independence still poses a threat. However, we're not getting really burned at the stake, but we are in just different connotations. Both of those works, The Crucible and The Scarlet Letter, those works are based on real tragedies that women have experienced, and we don't really think about that enough. If you're not a woman, you're not going to think much about it. It strikes you so much more when you experience it in your day-to-day life. Even if it's an older work, it still hits. Think about it and you're like, this is still happening. And of course I can see that from an outside perspective, right? I can see it with my own eyes. But do I feel it though? Exactly. As a woman, you really feel this stuff. That's why it's so frustrating to talk about it. We're still in Salem. Why are we still in Salem? We're not out of the woods yet. We're not. I'm sorry, I see it every day when my male friends underestimate me and my female friends, especially girls who don't look smart, because like girls that take care of themselves or do beauty things for themselves, and gosh, like I look good, like I do my lashes, I do my makeup, I do my nails. Suddenly I am usually seen first most as a bimbo, and then maybe once I start talking in like an intellectual conversation, maybe there's a little bit of more credit to what I'm actually saying, or once they learn that I speak multiple languages, I'm well traveled, all of this stuff, anything I could know, maybe I'm gonna get a little bit of credit. They like to categorize every woman. Unless you're like a nerd, you pop out. How do you see me now? If I'm just sitting there, you're not gonna be like, oh, she's about to spit some. Right, let me put these back on. Back to it. In both of these works, The Crucible and The Scarlet Letter, women are condemned for the same reason as the monsters, such as Medusa and Eve. It is because they knew. Because they experienced things and because they still defied the barriers that were set all around them. Still defied them. They still went against them. Knowledge and desire are great things. They're concepts without which we wouldn't be anywhere. The thing that makes us superior from other animals as humans is that we are inquisitive creatures. We have to know and we have to discover and we constantly have to do better and find more ways to make our lives better and make our lives easier, make the system that we've created go around in easier ways. That is what separates us from just primitive animals. However, when a woman desires to know more, now, of course, it's a bit of a different world. I know I was just hating on our world, but it is different and we've made a lot of progress thanks to mostly women fighting for our rights. Of course, we've had help, but women, we did do it for ourselves. The amount of time that it took for us to have, for us particularly as American women, it's been a long fight. But out there, the fight is going. It's going at a much higher pace and there's so much more to do out there. We're absolutely not done. There's places where women can't drive, can't vote. You would have never thought that a gender isn't able to do. It still exists. However, you just don't see it. Just because you don't see it when you walk out into the street and you don't hear about it from female friends or your family doesn't mean it's not out there and someone out there isn't living that reality right now. Knowledge and desire, when they're embodied by women, are dangerous, even though they are praised as a concept overall. The ability to introduce things into the world, it's a threat. As I've said, we've made plenty of progress, especially as a nation, when it comes to enabling women. Modern storytelling is still questionable. We would expect in the modern world and in modern storytelling for it to aid us as women with being wrongfully demonized for existing and for things that are needed, you know? For example, in Medusa's case, self-defense from such acts being committed upon us, sexuality, or defiance against the norms. It still exists. However, nowadays, it's not as blatantly shown because it is not applauded for women to be outworldly disrespected anymore. It's not gone, but it's precisely covered for there not to be any outworld backlash from the internet and from people that see it, because if it's covered well enough, it's very hard to make a claim saying, oh, what you just did is sexist or misogynistic, because then you have to point out the specific little hidden things that there possibly could be wrong with the media, modern art, modern movies that this appears in. The trickier you make it, especially as a male director, the better. The better for you. The better for your franchise. If you're sneaky enough with it, props to you. It's a pretext of good intentions or pretending that you are making something, your audience being women or for women or to advocate for women or to support women. The good intentions are very questionable at best. I am sure that y'all have heard of Jennifer's Body before. Jennifer's Body. We know that Megan Fox is extremely beautiful. And the film itself isn't even bad. I enjoyed it. However, it is very clearly catered to a male audience. Well, obviously, because it's Megan Fox. Obviously, the women love her as well. Don't get me wrong. Spoilers for Jennifer's Body, obviously. It's a misunderstood film at its release because in the movie, female power becomes literal horror. The idea of a woman's self-defense after sexual assault or after a sacrifice that she's been made to be is horror. The idea of a woman as a sacrifice to a dragon or a villain or a demon or something is just such a continuous idea. Why are we always sacrifices a virgin woman? But I fear that's gonna have to be another video because here we're talking about women as monsters, not sacrifices. The film uses monstrous femininity to expose the fear of women who reclaim their bodies and their appetites. An invisible string back to Medusa's curse from Jennifer's Body. Both Jennifer and Medusa were violated, and then they were rewritten as these terrifying monsters, these villains, as a way of surviving or some sort of pathetic attempt of a revenge. The hunger for vengeance after being traumatized and their need for a reclamation of what they were before being traumatized and violated is the story's terror, ultimately. That's what it becomes. That's what it's turned into, which is a theme that repeats in a less known movie than Jennifer's Body, but a newer one, Promising Young Woman. Also, spoilers, obviously, in which Cassie, the main character, is not a symbol of justice, but a symbol of madness. I believe it is that her best friend had been sexually assaulted and she goes off to get justice for her best friend. However, the movie very clearly does not present her as a symbol of justice, but a symbol of madness instead, as if she's going crazy for trying to get justice for her dear friend. The film, what it does is it disempowers its heroine by suggesting that the only way for a woman to fight back is through self-destruction. It's the type of film that a man will get mad at, because not all men, right? A man will get mad at the film when he sees Cassie killing all of these guys and doing them dirty, and then when she dies at the end, that's the satisfying ending. That's what you get as a woman. What were you thinking? Like, ultimately, female vengeance is simply not a thing. It's not redemptive whatsoever. There's no such thing as a female getting vengeance because it simply doesn't work, is what this movie's trying to teach us. It's tragic. it's irrational, or it's monstrous, it's wrong, and it's not fair for some reason. That's it compared to male heroism. Don't be a hero. You can't be both a woman and a hero. Either getting saved by someone else, a man, or you're just a tragic, lost victim. And you're never gonna get saved because there is no such thing as saving yourself. Even in romance, where there is truly no such like deep violence as we see in Jennifer's Body or Promising Young Woman, but the presentation of a woman is very questionable. For example, in 500 Days of Summer, her refusal of conforming to the male fantasy where she just agrees and she falls in love, and that is enough to make her the villain of the man's story. I am not trying to flame the writers of 500 Days of Summer because I actually think this is absolutely genius, and it's really thought-provoking to look at it from both Tom's and Summer's perspective. She never agreed to be in a love story, and I think that's why they start off the movie by saying this is not a love story, to make it very clear. It's funny. From Tom's perspective, it seems like it is, but then from Summer's, it's not. It was never a love story to her. She was just messing around, honestly. The amount of times people have done that, both men and women, just lead another person on. Charity was in the right because she made it very clear that this was not going to be a relationship. That's the difference. She wasn't leading anything on. She made it very clear. Summer Finn's only crime is not returning affection on command. She is not a dog. She's not a man's best friend. She's not going to just fall in love because Tom decided that that is the narrative of the story. That's not how it works. She said she didn't want a relationship. Finito. That's all. She's not a monster. You know how a lot of people say it's a horror movie? Whose fault is that? Definitely Summer's. Whether a woman is just simply monstrous like that, emotionally soulless, horrible, and then she got in a relationship right after, vengeful, or just she's simply uninterested, honestly. Any woman that resists the idea of the male or society's expectations, which in a patriarchal society, that is the male expectations, really, she's the enemy. The modern female monster, going from ancient Greeks, the Bible, witch trials, the modern female monster is not a creature of a legend anymore. She's just simply a woman who says no. Attempts to get revenge. She doesn't want things to go unsolved. She doesn't want crime to go unpunished. She doesn't want things not to be resolved. And she doesn't want to be in a relationship with a certain man. That's a female monster. Same thing goes back to Medusa. It's always been the same trope. We are just still stuck in it, except that now, instead of it being absolutely thrown at our faces, it is fed to us. Some might argue that it's a way to reclaim female monstrosity in order to make it empowering. There's films such as Midsummer or The Substance. These movies seem to give women control to hand it over, but the only control that comes to women is from the pain that was already induced upon them. It's always reclamation. It's never just control that it's not handed to them from men, because I guess there is no such thing. That's called privilege. Obviously, some women have more privilege than other women, but as women, collectively, we still lose. As a reminder that a lot of content on this channel is going to be lighthearted, is that today we had to make this type of video because it simply was necessary, and not only did my final crave it for school, but I craved to make it because I think it's a really good topic. I like it, and this is the stuff that I enjoy speaking about. If you enjoy conversations like this, go on my podcast. It's called the Golden Girl Podcast. It's right here. I'm going to put the link in the caption. We discuss a lot of important things to discuss. Girl talk, and it's not always serious girl talk about how twisted and sick the world is. It's also just about, girl stuff, beauty stuff, mental health stuff, all of that. I promise you, I can be unserious, and I can be funny, and I can be helpful, and not all of it is going to be this worldly perspective on all those matters. Go do that. Back to the topic. Let's talk about The Substance. Very interesting. I do think that is a good movie. You should watch it. It gives us a good perspective on plastic surgery, the beauty standards, unreal dystopian standards induced upon women, and the demonization of aging is very well portrayed in that movie. A little too well. It is terrifying. Not only visually terrifying, psychologically terrifying. It does make you think. let's talk about actual female monsters in just legends and folk stories. Let's talk about motherly monsters. There's a lot of motherly monsters out there. My TikTok For You page is full of paranormal stuff, so I know all about that. I'm certified in that knowledge. There's only motherly monsters. I don't really see any fatherly monsters. So we have La Llorona, the ghost of a mother who supposedly drowned her children. Huggin' Molly, who is also a female that is also punished for wrongdoings to her children. I'm not really gonna get too deep into that. We can totally do a video on folklore. Honestly, comment about that, what you want to see. That is another alternative of demonization of women. Women who love too much or suffer too openly or feel too hard in general are punished, and they're rewritten as threats. Or empathy, which is what women are very well known for and critiqued for. That is the problem of femininity in the world. Power only seems acceptable for a woman when it's a result of the tragedy that women experience. It cannot just be straight up power, it has to end possibly in another tragedy. How do we flip the script? How do we create women in stories who don't have to go through suffering and bleed to be powerful, and then can just be powerful? Pop culture needs to stop using trauma as a personality trait for women and stop pretending that suffering equals empowerment. It often doesn't. It often destroys a woman simply. It shouldn't be this character development that comes from suffering, because that is just another excuse and way of letting female suffering be a thing that is ignored and can just slide by. We can tell stories where women's power isn't rooted in their sadness and victimhood, where women's anger isn't being seen as hysteria, and knowledge of women isn't a sin, or the curiosity isn't a sin, and where self-preservation of a woman isn't mistaken for being cruel. Really, ultimately, all we do as humans is self-preserve. That is our main mission in life, and that's how it's been for ages. The female monster is really just a creature and a concept that needs to be understood. It doesn't need to be something that has to be destroyed or redeemed. It just has to be understood why there is the concept of a female monster. And I hope you learned something. Hopefully you have your own thoughts on the matter as well. In the end, I would say that the idea of the female monster isn't something that came from Hades or was born from darkness. Instead, it's a concept. The female monster was created from the fear that surrounds women. Every Medusa, every witch, and every woman who dared to know things and know too much or feel too deeply has been rewritten into a warning that other women do not make the mistake of stepping outside of the bounds. Monsters don't just appear out of nowhere. They're made by people that refuse to understand things, therefore they demonize them instead. When we think about it, maybe that is the real horror that surrounds us. Not the woman that grows fangs or is a succubus or a siren, but it's the world that forced her to be that way, and then we ask ourselves, why and how did she become this? Until we stop punishing women for being too powerful and exceeding past the norms, the stories are going to keep repeating and the monsters will keep multiplying. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you have some thoughts that you want to put in the comments. Subscribe and like this video, and let me know what you want to see me post. I might still post a summer vlog from Paris. I know that it's a little late for that, but I feel like I have to post it. You know, I recorded it for a reason. So if you see that pop up, go watch it.